Thank you for inviting me to this wonderful conference. So, Menno and Michiel, this is the way you should pronounce? Michiel. Great. So, yeah, I think this question is timely because as Peter Leiden and Suzanne Paulson evoked, we won't make the transition to decarbonization of the economy if it makes people unhappy. They're not going to do it if it makes them unhappy, because eventually what people target and aim to do is feel happy. Okay, so do we have to degrow to be happy, and can we do it? So first of all, yeah, just very rapidly, why do we want to measure happiness? Because as I just said, happiness is what people want. Ultimately, is the ultimate goal. You want to say, you can ask people, why do you work so much? I work to earn more money, maybe. Why? Because I want to have a house for my kids. And why? Because I want them to be happy. And why? Because it makes me happy. Okay, so it's the goal beyond which there is no other goal, as Aristotle already wrote. Governments care about it, so we know that somebody already talked about that, this well-being government or organization of several countries like the New Zealand, the OECD measures well-being, has been doing this for a long time. The Human Development Index is there since 1972. And then, yeah. People write about it. This is, everybody knows here, of course, Google Ngram. So it's just measuring the percentage of the fraction of times a certain word appears in the total amount of books that have been scanned by Google over time. So you can see that happiness is being increasingly interesting to people since the 90s. But Saint-Just said in the 18th century in France, happiness is a new concept. Le bonheur est une idée neuve en Europe. Happiness is a new idea in Europe in the 18th century, and this is true because with Ngram you can look at the occurrence of a world since the 16th century or 17th, and you can see indeed that the rising interest for happiness in the 18th century, and then not anymore, and then rise again in the 1990s. How do you measure happiness? Because I'm an economist, we care for measuring things, we're a quantitative approach. So we just ask people how satisfied they are with their life. They have to rate themselves on a scale from 0 to 10. 0, very unhappy. 10, very satisfied. Or maybe sometimes, 0 is the worst possible life for you, 10 is the best possible life for you. Where does your actual life stand? This is the most classic, usual way to ask the question. So we are agnostic. We don't need to say, we don't need to know what happiness is about. We just let people say themselves, each person has their own recipe. And then once we have these surveys, we can analyze what the general recipe is, per country, maybe by subgroups, by gender, by social strata, whatever. Okay, so what measurable things make people happy? Because what we do, we estimate an equation of happiness. So it's like all the ingredients that we can measure, and we can see what the relative weight of each thing is in the recipe of happiness. So the World Happiness Report has been doing this since 2012, based on the Gallup World Poll, which interviews 1,500 or 2,000 people every year in all the countries of the world. Okay, what matters? The first thing that matters is social support. Do you have someone you can count on if you're in trouble? This explains a third of a difference in the happiness of countries. The second thing is GDP per capita. And then you have healthy life expectancy, freedom to choose what you want in your life, generosity, donated to a charity or not, and governance. Michiel already talked about the ranking, so I'm not going to comment again, except that Israel was fourth. I don't think it's true anymore. And then you have the bottom of the ranking, which are, of course, again, countries at war. You have Lebanon, Afghanistan, etc. Other macro factors, trust, inequality, usually makes people unhappy unless there is a lot of social mobility. Environment, and you also have cultural differences. I think that the presentation by Susan Paulson showed that Latin America is a place where people are more happy. So if you have GDP per capita on the horizontal axis and average happiness per country, you can see that these green countries, Latin America, they're quite happy given their level of income, GDP per capita. So the objective conditions that we measure produce more happiness in these countries than they do in other similarly developed countries. The last issue of the World Happiness Report makes a focus on governance. They measure state effectiveness, state capacity. So fiscal capacity, so the capacity to levy taxes to finance universal public goods, collective capacity to avoid civil war and establish peace and justice, so to deliver public services, and legal capacity to impose the rule of law. They call it the pillars of prosperity, and it's super correlated with happiness. So up to now, individual factors, of course, jobs. So having a job is a source of happiness, is super important. It's not only because it gives you an income, even for the same level, even beyond the income factor. Being unemployed is something you never get over. Autonomy and control, prospects for progression, and meaning. So among all these factors, what is correlated with growth? GDP per capita, obviously. Prospects for progression, probably. Jobs. And that's it. All the rest you can do without growing. So does income growth make us happy, or can we be happy without growth? This is really the ink bottle of this literature. All this research in happiness started with Richard Easterlin, a professor in economics at the University of South California, who wrote a paper asking, will raising the incomes of all increase the happiness of all? And his answer was no. Why? Well, there is a famous paradox named after Easterlin. It's called the Easterlin paradox. So what is the paradox? The paradox is that when you look at the relationship between income and happiness, you have inconsistent answers depending on how you look at things. If you look within a country, the richer are the happier. If you look across country, the richer are the happier. If you look over time in the short run, when your income increases, you feel better. But if you look at things on the long run, multiplying GDP per twofold or threefold doesn't seem to make people happy. So this is really strange. So the relationship between so within country, over time in the short run, across country, the answer is yes, money makes people happy. But over the long run, the answer is no. So how can it be? So this is just a graphic illustration of what I say. So each line is a country. Here you have the level of income per group. So here is the group of people who earn $1,000, $3,000, $50,000, etc. So you plot each country with these deciles, and you can see that within a country, when income increases, when you belong in a richer income group, you are happy, and you can also see that countries which are richer are more happy, with the cultural differences that, again, are represented by the colors. Okay, so this is about the same thing. So this is cross-section of countries. So, richer, happier. This is a business cycle, so Standard & Poor index, fluctuating every day, and the Gallup health survey that is run in the United States every day. And so you can see that they evolve more or less together. But on the long run, this is a very famous Easterlin curve that maybe some of you already know, that this is GDP per capita in the United States, 1972 until 2002. So starting at 17,000, so multiplied by 2. This is the average answer of Americans to how happy they are. It fluctuates over time, but if you take the two extreme points and draw a line, the trend is flat. So why spend all your time earning money if, after all, it doesn't make you happy? Maybe we should change something. So why? Why doesn't GDP growth make people happy? First of all, maybe because we don't like fluctuations. We have loss aversion. So when we have a business cycle, when the economy grows, it makes people more happy. But when there is a recession, it makes people very unhappy. So the economy has fluctuations, and the happiness of people goes like this. And so, like this. And so if you draw a line again, between the two extreme points of subjective well-being, it will be flat. But Easterlin's explanation is more this, adaptation. We adapt to everything. So we think, I'm going to work a lot, I'm going to earn more money, and I'm going to live in a much nicer way, and I'll be happy. And so you do so, and you do reach this higher level of income. And after 2 years, your level of aspirations has gone up. And because the satisfaction depends on the difference between what you have and what you aspire to, the gap remains constant, and nobody's happier. So adaptation, the evolution of aspirations, is destroying the hedonic benefit of income growth. So this is just so material aspirations increase commensurately with income, and as a result, one gets no nearer farther away from the attainment of material goal, and well-being is unchanged. Okay, so it's deceptive. Comparisons is the same phenomenon, except that satisfaction depends on the difference between what you have and what some reference group has. Your neighbor, your colleague, your brother-in-law, your whatever, the group of people you compare to. And so if the incomes of all, will raising the incomes of all increase the happiness of all? Well, no, because if the incomes of all increase, then no, the gap remains the same for everybody. If the incomes of some people increase and some other people decrease, it's a zero-sum game. Some people are gaining, some people are losing, and globally, global happiness does not increase. Okay, so this we know. This is really the literature, and there's a lot of empirical papers providing evidence of comparisons, adaptation, etc. So if income growth is not making people more happy, let's just degrow. Why not? Because if income does not make people happy, then degrowth will not make people unhappy. So because we know that we have to face the ecological problem, we have to decarbonize the economy, probably we have to degrow, unless, as Peter Leiden suggested, technology is going to save us, green technology. So either we have the climate constraint is going to constrain us to degrow, and we can see already that it's not going to make people happy. So nowadays, for instance, we have inflation, not because of ecology, but because of Ukrainian war and the disorganization of supply chains. So inflation is high. This is new. We haven't had inflation for decades. Now we do. People are very unhappy with that. So this is like it is exactly tantamount to a mega carbon tax. Exactly what we have to do if we want to decarbonize the economy. The carbon tax we have now with inflation. So it does not look like it's going to make people happy. So maybe there will be a new cluster of innovation, so the Peter Leiden optimistic scenario, and so green energy, hydrogen, etc. So on the contrary, decarbonizing the economy would create a new growth cycle, and this would be great, and we would not need to degrow. Maybe, so let's hope so. But let's consider the pessimistic scenario. So green technology innovations are too slow. This is a risk. So societies have to cut down on their production and consumption in order to reduce carbon emission. So will it make people happy or unhappy? So it will make people unhappy because we have learned now at an accelerated pace that we are sensitive to the business cycle. We don't like recessions, so we don't like to degrow. But maybe it will just be one time. Suppose that we degrow abruptly. We all decide to stop consuming and even reduce our consumption. So it will be painful, but maybe we will adapt, because adaptation is killing the benefit of growth. So adaptation, conversely, will attenuate, after some time, the pain of degrowth. So this would be nice. But we also have comparisons. So we degrow, okay, but who and how? Does everybody degrow at the same pace? If so, it will be less painful, because we really care about relative income concerns or comparisons. If some people have to give up more on their consumption than others, then these comparisons will play, and this will be very difficult. Anyway, it's not completely clear that the hedonic benefit of growth is completely relative. So here the question is, do levels matter at all? You know, in the Kahneman and Tversky behavioral economic view, we only care about differences, about variations. We compare everything to a benchmark. We really don't care about levels. We don't care how much we consume. We don't care about the size of our houses. We don't care about the level of our income. We only care about that compared to some benchmark. So this is the relative view. Is this completely true? Is this the whole story? Is everything, are all our perceptions relative? Or is there any role in our life for the absolute level of things? It's not completely clear that everything is relative. GDP growth has brought an increase in life expectancy, a fall in child mortality, in mother's mortality, an increase in healthcare, an increase in education. These are absolute things. They don't depend on comparisons. So it's not clear that degrowth would make people happy because it would affect this. On the other hand, it's true that for some people, voluntary sobriety could be a good thing. There are people who enjoy, being virtuous, consuming less, changing their lifestyle, because it gives them a good self-image, and also maybe it's nice. This is what Susan Paulson evoked. Maybe for some people, they coordinate, they agree to reduce, even if they have productivity gains, they are not going to increase the total output because they agree on this lifestyle. If this is voluntary, this is really nice. Is everybody willing to do so? I'm not convinced. At least not for the moment. Some people are really not yet in this state of mind. But it's true that in our surveys that we have at the Wellbeing Observatory, we can see that people who say that they already have changed something in their life, they have changed their eating habits, they have changed their transportation habits for green mobility, they are also, independently of this question, we can also see that they're more satisfied with their life and more happy. So it's true for people who do it, it's true that they are more happy. Is there any causality there? For the moment, it's not proven, but could be. The other thing that does not go in the sense of degrowth makes people happy is something that I talked about, is we like to dream about more. We like to dream about new. We like to dream that something else. Maybe this is just because we've been formatted this way by our education, by these societies, or maybe it's anthropological. I don't know, but I think all of us here, we like to fantasize about, future prospects for progression. We like to have objects of desire that are new. And this is exactly the definition of growth. Growth is just when you increase the social value of what society produces. So you increase it, so it has to be new. And also intergenerational growth. We also like when people like to be on an ascending trajectory. They don't like to have the same wage all their life. They hate to have lower wage when they age. We also like to think that our children will live better than we do. So we like progression as such. To be discussed whether it's really hardwired or changeable. And finally, so what is the way out? I mean, if at least part of us really enjoy, growth and consumption, etc., what to do? I think it cannot be contested that we enjoy consumption. In the basic model of economics, utility, so well-being, depends on your consumption and your leisure. So consumption is what? It's your purchasing power, you exercise your power, you feel alive, because you can decide what you do with your money. It's your money, it could be something else, but you can decide to travel, to buy something, to what you want to do. This is exercise of power. Consumption is, what do you do when you consume? You consume a good. What is a good? It's something that produces good. A good feeling. It's completely tautological. So consumption is a source of happiness. It's also a source of comfort. You can afford a house, a roof, etc. There is this psychologist called Csikszentmihalyi, who says that happiness is, for each person, the right degree between excitement and comfort. Too much excitement is, you feel nervous and bad.
too much comfort, you are bored. So each person is trying to seek to strike the right degree between comfort and excitement, but there has to be also comfort. So consumption is needed. But maybe we can make here a distinction between consumption and consumerism. So the way we consume now is really, this fast consumption. Consumerism is a way of life where you derive a lot of pleasure from consuming a lot of things and replacing them very, very often, throwing things away instead of repairing them, fast consumption and rapid obsolescence. And so there are other types of consumption that we could call investment goods. It's not investment, it's still consumption goods, but it's investment goods. What does it mean? It means you have to invest before you enjoy, before you consume. So invest what? Your effort, your time. Like what? Like learning how to appreciate opera, music, I don't know, gym, yoga, playing music, painting, or whatever needs an initial training time maybe. And then once you get there, you have increasing returns. So the pleasure we derive from each unit of this activity or thing increases with the quantity that you have already consumed, increasing returns, like learning curve. This is the contrary of the usual consumer goods, where you enjoy the first units, and then the more you get of the same good, the less you enjoy it. First pair of shoe, if I'm barefoot, it's great. Second pair of shoe is nice because it's not the same color, and the 150th pair of shoe, I almost don't care, and I don't remember I had it. So for the traditional consumer goods, you have decreasing marginal utility. For the investment consumer goods, you have increasing returns. So maybe, it's self-reinforcing pleasure. So maybe one thing to do is to shift consumption from this usual consumer goods for which quantity and time plays against your pleasure to these investment goods for which quantity and time plays in favor of the pleasure you derive from it. And so my final point about this, because investment goods, you can see that what you have to invest is your time and effort. So time is important, and maybe it's time to think about time in another way. So in this basic model I was telling you about, utility, so well-being, depends on my consumption, my leisure. How is it defined? Consumption is anything you can buy, and leisure is non-working time, the time that you are not spending working for money. But Gary Becker, who is a Nobel Prize in economics, professor at the University of Chicago, the most liberal standard economist you can think about, when he writes, he says, this is not the way you should think about things. We never do pure leisure, like I'm not using any good, or pure consumption. We always consume commodities. Commodities is a mix of time. I'm reading a book, but I'm reading my time, a book, an object. So time plus market good. And so maybe it's time to think about time not as just an investment, like I spend time getting educated to find a job and work, or I spent not as an input in some process, but as a consumption per se. So what do I do with my time? How do I enjoy my time? And how do I invest this time, spend my time in these investment goods? I have a recent paper that just came out that shows that people who have a more diverse agenda, so they don't only spend all their time working, but they also have other activities. This is based on time use surveys, American and French. People who have a more diverse agenda, more diverse time use, they are more happy. They have higher life satisfaction. Women have a more diverse agenda than men, but this is not reserved for women. Men who have a more diverse agenda are also more happy than men who just focus. So this is just an illustration of the importance of how you spend your time. So, of course, an open question is, what is artificial intelligence going to do to the time we spend? Maybe it can save us a lot of time from work or from traditional consumption and do something else. Maybe we can use artificial intelligence for this learning goods, for this investment goods. And that's it. So my conclusion would not be like grow or degrow. It would be rather change the nature of growth,
decarbonize happiness and try to think about shifting your consumption patterns to some other types of goods. That's it.
Fascinating.